13 islands so dangerous, humans gave up on them. There is an island off the coast of Brazil where the government bans all entry. Not because of military operations, not because of toxic waste, not because of radiation, because of snakes. One snake for every square meter of land. The most venomous pit viper in the Western Hemisphere. Venom that destroys tissue so fast it can kill an adult in under an hour. And no way out, because the island is surrounded by open ocean and the only building on it is an abandoned lighthouse, rumored to have killed its last keeper. That island is real. It is sitting there right now, 90 miles off the coast of Sao Paulo. And it is not even close to the strangest island on this list. There are 13 islands scattered across this planet that humans have tried and failed to hold. Not because of bad luck or poor planning, because something about each of them pushed back hard enough that eventually everyone gave up. Each one has a different reason. Each reason is stranger than the last. Let's go. Ilha da Queimada Grande, Brazil. Snake Island. The island looks like paradise from the water. Dense green forest, white rock cliffs, tropical light. The kind of place that should have a resort and a long wait list for summer bookings. Instead, it has a legal prohibition. The Brazilian Navy enforces a permanent no-landing policy. Researchers require government approval. Fishermen know better than to anchor near the shore. The reason? Bothrops insularis, the golden lancehead pit viper. An endemic species found nowhere else on Earth, existing in a population estimated between 2,000 and 4,000 individuals on an island measuring roughly 430,000 square meters. The density calculation is ugly. How did this happen? When sea levels rose after the last ice age, the island was cut off from the mainland. The snakes had no ground predators. Birds were their only prey. And so natural selection did what it always does. It optimized. The golden lancehead evolved venom 5 times more potent than its mainland relatives. Fast-acting, tissue-destroying, calibrated over thousands of years for a specific hunting problem on a specific island. The lighthouse at the island's southern tip was staffed until the 1920s, when it was automated. Stories circulate about the last keeper and his family, that the snakes found a way in through the windows, that the family tried to flee to their boat and were overtaken on the path down. The accounts are unverified and probably embellished. What is not embellished is what researchers find when they do go. Snakes in trees, snakes on rocks, snakes in the abandoned lighthouse itself, coiled on equipment and in corners like they inherited the place, which, technically, they did. North Sentinel Island, India, the island that enforces itself. There is an island in the Bay of Bengal, roughly the size of Manhattan, that the Indian government has declared off-limits with a 5 nautical mile exclusion zone. The Navy patrols it. Approaching without clearance is a criminal offense. But the island enforces its own boundaries more effectively than any law. North Sentinel Island is home to the Sentinelese, the most isolated human population on Earth, living in voluntary isolation that has persisted for an estimated 60,000 years. They have no contact with the outside world. They do not want any, and they communicate that fact without ambiguity. In 2006, 2 fishermen whose boat drifted too close while they slept were killed on the beach. In 2018, an American missionary named John Allen Chow paid fishermen to bring him near the island. He swam ashore repeatedly over several days. On his last approach, he was killed with arrows. His body was buried on the beach. Indian authorities made no attempt to retrieve it. The science behind the isolation policy is more unsettling than the hostility. The Sentinelese have developed in complete biological separation from the rest of humanity. Their immune systems have never been exposed to the pathogens that circulate across the connected world. Measles, influenza, common cold strains. A single sick visitor could trigger a disease event that wipes out the entire population. This is not speculation. It has happened to other isolated indigenous groups, repeatedly, throughout history. The Sentinelese know nothing of this mechanism, but their behavior produces the same result as the policy designed to protect them. An island of somewhere between 50 and 500 people, exact numbers are impossible to determine, that has held off every contact attempt for over a century. No missionary, no colonizer, no government, no anthropologist has ever had a sustained conversation with anyone who lives there. The island is green, beautiful, surrounded by coral reef. From the air, it looks uninhabited. From 5 miles out, arrows start flying. Hashima Island, Japan, the city that ran out of reason. On April 20th, 1974, the last resident of Hashima Island boarded a ferry to the mainland. By that evening, an entire city, apartment blocks, schools, a hospital, restaurants, a swimming pool, was empty. Nobody destroyed it. The coal ran out, the mine closed, and a city of 5,000 people ceased to have a reason to exist. Hashima, nicknamed Gunkanjima, Battleship Island, sits 15 kilometers off Nagasaki. Its silhouette is unsettling, a dense wall of concrete rising straight from the water, no beaches, no trees, ringed by a seawall. From a distance, it resembles a warship. From closer, a city that forgot it was floating in the ocean. Mitsubishi bought the island in 1890 and built Upward, Japan's first large-scale concrete residential buildings, because wood couldn't survive the typhoons. By 1959, Hashima was the most densely populated place on Earth, over 5,000 people on 6.5 hectares. Miners worked seabed tunnels at 30 degrees Celsius and 95% humidity, a kilometer underground. The darker history runs alongside. During World War II, Korean and Chinese forced laborers were brought to work the mines. Estimates suggest around 1,300 of them died, in accidents, from illness, from conditions survivors described with words that don't appear in corporate histories. Some tried to swim to the mainland. The distance is 15 kilometers of open water. When petroleum replaced coal in the 1960s, Mitsubishi began quietly relocating workers. In January 1974, the mine closed. 3 months later, everyone was gone. They left furniture, clothes, dishes in cupboards, apparently expecting someone would return to collect things. No one did. The buildings have been crumbling ever since, eaten by salt air and typhoons. A UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2015, it receives organized tours. Visitors must stay on a designated path. The rest is too dangerous to walk. 5,000 people. One corporate decision. In under a day, a city became a ruin. Poveglia Island, Italy. The island built from death. There is a small island in the Venetian lagoon, a few minutes by boat from the tourist routes of Venice, that the Italian government has kept closed to the public for most of the past century. Poveglia's history is a sequence of catastrophes, each one using the island as a container for something the mainland wanted put somewhere else. In the 14th century, as Black Death swept through Europe, Venice, one of the busiest ports in the world, needed somewhere to send the sick and dying. Poveglia became a quarantine island. Ships approaching Venice stopped there first. The infected were unloaded. Most never left. How many died there across the centuries of plague quarantine is disputed, but the number is large enough that some soil surveys have suggested the ground contains a substantial proportion of ash and human bone. In 1922, a psychiatric hospital was built on the island. It operated until 1968, then was shuttered. Staff transferred, patients moved, buildings left standing. Vegetation has grown through the floors. The bell tower still stands without a bell. The Italian government has periodically considered selling Poveglia for private development. Each attempt has met public resistance. It sits in the lagoon, visible from tourist boats, inaccessible, decomposing. A short boat ride from one of the most visited cities in the world and completely unreachable. Ramree Island, Myanmar. The mangroves that ate an army. In January 1945, approximately 1,000 Japanese soldiers retreated into the mangrove swamps of Ramree Island during a British encirclement operation. Over the following weeks, roughly 500 of them never came out. Saltwater crocodiles are native to those mangroves. Crocodylus porosus, the largest living reptile on Earth, operating in dark water with no visibility. British officers offshore reported sounds from the swamp at night. The Guinness Book of World Records listed Ramree as the deadliest crocodile attack in history, a distinction drawn from primary testimonials later scrutinized by historians. The precise breakdown between crocodiles, disease, and drowning will never be established. What is established? 1,000 soldiers went in. Most did not come out. And Ramree Island, even today, is not a place where visitors wade into coastal swamps after dark. Bouvet Island, South Atlantic, the loneliest place on Earth. There is an island in the South Atlantic Ocean with no permanent inhabitants, no airport, no harbor, and no practical way to land. The nearest land with any human presence is over 2,500 kilometers away. Bouvet Island holds a specific distinction. It is the most remote island on Earth. Not the most remote inhabited island, that title belongs to Tristan da Cunha. Bouvet is categorically different. It is a piece of rock in the Southern Ocean, roughly 49 square kilometers in area, 93% covered by a glacier, ringed by cliffs that make landing by ship nearly impossible in most conditions. It belongs to Norway, which administers it as a nature reserve. A small automated weather station exists on the island. No human being is supposed to be there. In 1964, a British naval vessel doing a routine survey of Bouvet discovered an abandoned lifeboat on the island. Inside, oars, a copper flotation device, and evidence that someone had been there recently. No survivors. No wreckage of a ship visible anywhere. No record of any vessel having gone down in the vicinity. No one has ever been identified. No ship has been matched to the lifeboat. The mystery has never been resolved. The investigation, such as it was, concluded with no conclusions. Someone reached the most remote island on Earth and then apparently vanished. The island remains as it was. Wind, glacier, cliffs. The Southern Ocean in every direction for 2,000 kilometers. Gruinard Island, Scotland. The island they poisoned themselves. In 1942, the British government acquired a small island off the northwest coast of Scotland and conducted weapons tests that would leave it uninhabitable for the next 48 years. The weapon was Bacillus anthracis, anthrax. Gruinard Island, about half a kilometer from the mainland at its nearest point, was selected precisely because of its isolation. Bombs filled with anthrax spores were detonated above a flock of sheep tethered in the open. The sheep died within days. The tests confirmed what the researchers needed to know about weaponized anthrax as a delivery mechanism. What they did not fully account for was persistence. Anthrax spores are extraordinarily durable. They do not degrade under normal environmental conditions. They can survive in soil for decades, longer under the right conditions. After the tests, Gruinard Island was contaminated at a level that made any human presence dangerous. The British government posted warning signs and maintained a quarantine for nearly 5 decades. In 1986, a decontamination operation began. 280 tons of formaldehyde solution diluted in seawater applied across the island's soil. It took years. In 1990, a flock of sheep was placed on the island as a test. They survived. The Ministry of Defense declared the island safe and formally returned it to the original family from whom it had been requisitioned in 1942, for a nominal sum. The island is technically inhabitable now. Nobody lives on it. The ferry from the mainland doesn't stop there. Visitors occasionally land by private boat. The grass grows, the birds return, the soil appears normal. But it is still the island that the British government poisoned for half a century, then handed back with a note saying it was fine now. Whether fine describes it adequately is a judgment each visitor makes for themselves. Rottnest Island, Australia. Paradise built on chains. Rottnest Island sits 11 kilometers off Perth, Western Australia. Clear water, reef-fringed, popular with day trippers who photograph quokkas, the small marsupials that produce what the internet has decided are the world's happiest animal selfies. That surface has a foundation most visitors are not thinking about. From 1838 to 1931, Rottnest was the site of a colonial Aboriginal prison. Indigenous Australians, predominantly men who had resisted colonial encroachment, were sent there because isolation made escape impossible. Over 9 decades, roughly 4,000 Aboriginal men and boys were incarcerated there. Many died. Estimates place around 370 people buried in a mass grave on the island, though the true number is considered likely higher. For most of the 20th century, this history was minimized. The conversion to a resort destination proceeded without much accounting. In recent decades, that has changed. The Whadjuk Noongar people, for whom the island carries deep cultural significance under its name Wajimub, have pushed for formal acknowledgement. A repatriation program for ancestral remains began. An interpretive center was established. The quokka photos continue to circulate. But the island now carries its full history rather than the edited version. King Island, Alaska, where the cliff was the village. There is a rock in the Bering Sea, roughly 40 miles off the coast of Alaska, that rises from the water in near vertical cliffs on all sides. King Island has no flat ground, no harbor, no protected anchorage. The Yukivokmut built their village on the cliff face anyway. Not on top of the island, on the side of it. Houses on stilts driven into the rock, stacked against the slope at an angle that seems to reject basic concepts of stability. In winter, hunters arrived to work the sea ice for walrus and seal. The island was the permanent address, the anchor point, home. By the mid-1900s, the Bureau of Indian Affairs closed the island's school. Without a school, families with children were forced to the mainland. Without families, the community unraveled. The last permanent residents left in the 1970s. The houses remain on the cliff, hollow, tilting, some collapsed, exactly as abandoned. What King Island demonstrates is that humans can live in conditions that look completely unsurvivable. Survival is accumulated knowledge and cultural practice. Remove one element, the school, the supply route, the subsidy, and the rest can collapse. The island did not become uninhabitable. The infrastructure around inhabiting it was dismantled. The cliff houses are still there, still standing. Palmyra Atoll, Pacific Ocean, the island with a reputation. Palmyra Atoll is a group of small coral islands about 1,000 miles south of Hawaii. A small rotation of researchers and conservation staff. No permanent civilian population. On paper, a remote Pacific wildlife refuge. In practice, one of the more documented sequences of misfortune associated with any Pacific island. Shipwrecks, a mutiny in the 1800s, multiple deaths during World War II. Then, in 1974, a yacht called the Sea Wind arrived. Its owners were later found dead. Eleanor Graham's bones recovered in a metal container floating in the lagoon. A couple also anchored at Palmyra at the time was subsequently convicted of the murders. The scientific explanation is not supernatural. Small, isolated anchorages attract concentrated populations of long-distance ocean voyagers, and a small but real percentage of them are people doing desperate things. Palmyra provides no supply store, no authority within 1,000 miles, no exit except the open Pacific. Under those conditions, conflict escalates differently. Palmyra is not cursed, but it has been a container for a remarkable concentration of human darkness, and the waters around it remember every one of them. Réunion Island's Shark Coast, France. The island that banned the ocean. Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean is a French overseas territory. A volcanic island with dramatic mountain scenery, black sand beaches, and a surfing culture that drew visitors from across the world. Then, beginning around 2011, something shifted. The shark attack rate around Reunion spiked to the highest per capita rate of any coastline on Earth. Between 2011 and the early 2020s, dozens of attacks occurred, many of them fatal. The French government issued a series of restrictions, banning surfing and swimming at most of the island's western coastline. Not for a season, indefinitely. The reasons are still being studied and debated. Reunion sits near a marine protected area that was established in 2007. Restrictions on fishing allowed bull shark and tiger shark populations to recover and, potentially, to concentrate. Bull sharks in particular are known to be aggressive and to operate in shallow coastal water. There is also an argument about bait fish populations, about runoff from the island changing water chemistry near the shore, and about whether construction in the island's rivers disturbed the bull shark pupping grounds and pushed more of them into coastal shallows. The scientific consensus is not fully settled. What is settled? A French island in the Indian Ocean, with beautiful beaches and a surf break that attracted professional and recreational surfers from around the world, effectively lost access to most of its coastline for years. Not because of a storm, not because of pollution, not because of some industrial decision, because the biology of the surrounding water changed in a way humans are still trying to understand. Fishermen adapted, tourism adapted. But the image of an island that had to ban its own ocean, that had to tell its residents and visitors that the water was no longer theirs to use, sits with you. The island hasn't moved. The water hasn't moved. Something below the surface shifted, and the island has not fully recovered what it had. Bikini Atoll, Marshall Islands, the island they broke with physics. In March 1954, the United States detonated a thermonuclear device on a coral atoll in the Pacific. The device was codenamed Castle Bravo. Its predicted yield was 6 megatons. The actual yield was 15, 2.5 times larger than planned, because the weapons designers had underestimated how much energy one of the lithium isotopes in the fuel would contribute. In the first seconds, the fireball was 4 miles wide. 3 islands in the Bikini chain were vaporized. The crater in the reef floor was more than a mile across and 250 feet deep. Radioactive fallout landed on inhabited atolls to the east, on a Japanese fishing vessel 200 miles away, and on Marshall Islands populations who had already been relocated twice to make way for earlier tests. Between 1946 and 1958, 23 nuclear devices were detonated at Bikini. The 167 residents had been asked, under significant pressure, framed by U.S. Navy officers as a contribution to world peace, to temporarily relocate. Temporarily became permanently. Cesium-137, strontium-90, plutonium-239 entered the soil and the food chain. Coconuts grown on Bikini today still test above safe consumption levels. Fish from the lagoon carry measurable contamination. The sunken battleships from the 1946 tests lie on the lagoon floor, radioactive, and have become one of the stranger diving destinations in the Pacific. The Bikinian people were resettled to Rongelap Atoll, then to Kili Island, then, after a brief and disastrous attempt to return in the 1970s that resulted in elevated radiation exposure, relocated again. They remain displaced. Their atoll was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2010, recognized for historical significance and its extraordinary preservation as an underwater archaeological site. The irony is precise. Bikini is now, in certain technical senses, a pristine environment. No human habitation means the reef has recovered in places. Marine life is abundant. But the fish carry cesium. The coconuts carry strontium. The soil has not been safe for food production for 70 years. The people asked to temporarily leave in 1946 are still waiting to go back. Bikini is not on this list because it kills the fastest. Snake Island would do that. It's here because it represents the specific moment when human capability and human foresight split apart completely. We built something powerful enough to vaporize islands. We had not thought through what happens to the people we moved out of the way while we used it. The United States has paid compensation. The Marshall Islands government has sought more. The negotiations continue. The isotopes decay on their own schedule, indifferent to the proceedings. Every island on this list lost something different. Snake Island lost its human population to biology that outlasted any lighthouse keeper. Gruinard lost half a century to weapons research that didn't account for how long the aftermath lasts. Hashima lost 5,000 lives worth of furniture to a single corporate decision. Bikini lost the only thing that actually mattered, the people who lived there. What connects them is not disaster. It's a specific kind of reminder that islands concentrate consequences. On a continent, you can walk away from a flooded river, a failed mine, a poisoned valley. You can move inland, find higher ground, relocate the settlement. Islands don't offer that option. When something goes wrong on an island, it goes wrong completely. The edge is never far, and the ocean doesn't negotiate. The ones on this list didn't lose quietly. They left the buildings standing, the dolls hanging, the lighthouse automated, the cliff houses tilting over the Bering Sea. Monuments to the specific moment when humans decided that whatever was keeping them there was no longer enough. The investigation continues.